Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Thursday, March 25th, 12:01 p.m. And this is a joint meeting of Senate Agriculture, Senate Appropriations, Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and we may be joined by some colleagues from Senate Transportation. So it's great to have us all together because water is an interest to every committee. We all come to it through a little different lens, but we have a shared interest in keep maintaining clean water, improving water quality in the state, and also in doing it in the most cost-effective ways. So you are really sort of eyes and ears for us out there in the world working on all this, and I'd love to have a chance for all of us to hear your presentation. There are a lot of us, so rather than pause and have introductions all the way around, we'll use up 10% of our time doing that. I think most all of us have met in the past. So let's just jump right in and turn to today's MC on your side, Mr. Wenberg. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much. And for the record, I'm Jeff Wenberg. I'm the recent former Commissioner of Public Works for the City of Rutland, here as a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee on the Future of Lake Champlain. We have several committee members also here who are going to keep me out of trouble, hopefully, with all the committees. Lori Fisher, who is a former chair, and almost like member emeritus, I don't know, you're there forever. Hillary Solomon, who, like me, hails from Southern Vermont. Mark Nod, who's the current chair and lives in Grand Isle. He's an attorney. And there may be one or more also joining us later. And I encourage, if the chair would indulge, the members to jump in. One of the things about this committee is the various members have different perspectives and expertise, and they bring a lot to the table. There are 10 citizen members of the committee, which was formed by a legislative act in 1988. It first met in 1989. And it works through a memorandum of understanding with committees of similar makeup for the state of New York and the province of Quebec. So it is very much focused on Lake Champlain and the basin that supports it. And I have been asked to sort of begin the presentation here. Now, you should have all received electronically this document, which is and I'll put that up on the screen share in a moment, which is our 2021 action plan. Our charter empowers us, or more to the point, charges us with the responsibility of researching the current situation of water quality concerns, habitat concerns, and also, economic concerns for the lake and the tributaries that feed to it from the state of Vermont. And we meet typically about once a month. This last year, that was reduced significantly because of COVID, but we've resumed that as well. And we receive lots of briefings and information from various experts, both within the administration here in the state of Vermont, but also from others, various NGOs, federal officials, that kind of thing. And the Lake Champlain, of course, Basin program, very much. We also take comment, as you folks do, from members of the public, and get a lot of feedback regarding public concerns for the state of the lake and where things seem to be headed. So hopefully we will be a useful resource for your efforts to, like ours, to improve water quality in Lake Champlain. Now, if I could just do this share screen, and hope everybody can see that.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. So our action plan is summarized by the boldface on the front page. It's just 2 pages, and we try to keep it really to the point. And we have 6 areas that we are encouraging focus, action, investment, or whatever on going forward. The main thing that we've been advocating for years and years and years is adequate funding to support various activities relative to water quality in Lake Champlain. Of course, right up front is the phosphorus TMDL, the restoration plan. Of course, the legislature has very much stepped up to the plate on that, and there are advancing opportunities through federal funding, to COVID, and potentially infrastructure funding that could be coming in the relatively near future. And obviously want to encourage looking at these issues and challenges as part of the state's response, which the governor is already doing in some respects in his budget. To get into the specific areas of recommendation, of priority areas, I'll just go through them. I'll summarize. I'm not going to read them because you've got them. But investment in natural and developed infrastructure, this goes along very much with the restoration plan. It connects the issues of ecosystem restoration and wetlands restoration, floodplain restoration with climate change. And there is a direct connection between carbon sequestration and those things. But we also need to focus very much on, and this is kind of my thing, I'll let the other members of the committee focus on their areas of specific expertise. But one of the main issues that unmet challenges that is challenging us relative to phosphorus is urban lands and the stormwater runoff relative to streets, sidewalks, urban lands. And the phosphorus contribution to the lake there is dramatically more than it is from wastewater treatment plants or many of the other sectors. Agriculture and urban lands really are very, very big. We'll get to agriculture in a minute. But there is going to need to be substantially more public and private investment in dealing with stormwater runoff from developed areas if we are going to meet the targets on the TMDL. Adding to this challenge, of course, is the situation with the 3-acre rule, which has been some relief provided, limited, for municipalities, and also access to public financing for private property owners that need to do this. But basically because of the impact on the business community through COVID and the fact that the agency, as a former DEC commissioner, I think I can say this, the Department of Environmental Conservation has underestimated the typical cost of meeting these current requirements for stormwater treatment, that a great many private and nonprofit and even some municipal challenges are not going to be met without additional financial assistance coming from outside. And I want to bring a lot of attention to that because, quite frankly, the 3-acre rule is necessary to meet the Lake Champlain TMDL. It is the next necessary step, but it will fail if there isn't substantial assistance that is going to be available to businesses that don't, it's certainly not good for anybody if the business has to make a decision between essentially closing its doors because it can't afford the investment required. That does not improve water quality, and it certainly doesn't help the economy of the state locally or at the state level. So we can give some specific examples of things we've heard about that, but that's my little sermon on that.
Can I respond to your sermon just very briefly?
Yes, please.
Senate Natural had the congressional delegation in this morning, and I'm sure the whole Senate will be working with the American Recovery Program, et cetera. But it seems as though there's some promising information in what's in the earliest notice about the availability of federal funds for exactly these sorts of projects. The challenge is the Treasury, which has to define the precise rules, has 60 days to do so. So we might not see precise rules until close to our typical adjournment date. So the work to be done, but for the maybe once in a decade or generation, there could be significant funds available.
And that is the best news possible, because there are a number of items on our action plan that could be either accelerated or become more successful if we were able to apply some of those funds. I know that the demand is going to be enormous, but some of those funds to the needs that we identify here. So that's wonderful, timely news. The next one is investment in public access and the recreation economy. This is an item we've had on our action plan for a number of years. Basically, this serves multiple purposes. Obviously, there's an economic benefit if more and more people have the ability to access the lake and the waters feeding the lake without having to own property adjacent to it. We believe pretty strongly that this is an underserved need. And in fact, during this last summer, which was very favorable weather, but also drove an awful lot of folks to want to do outdoor recreation in Vermont because of the COVID restrictions and the limitations on travel and also on indoor activities. So I believe we saw about a 50% increase in the demand or the activity and use of our waterways. That's wonderful, wonderful news, because the reality is people value what they know and what they experience. And the more Vermonters, especially younger Vermonters, who have the opportunity to experience and enjoy the natural environment, specifically Lake Champlain and our waterways, they will value it more because of those experiences, especially and that was true for me as a young person. And so that is really an investment in the future kind of political constituency that will be needed to sustain these efforts going forward. So it's an immediate economic thing. It is a long-term sustainability, if you will, from the standpoint of keeping these priorities in front of Vermonters' current and future. And it's also a crying need that we have, especially in the area of the South Lake, where there are very limited opportunities compared to some other regions for public access to the waters. Oops, didn't know I could do that. The third one is aquatic invasive species prevention needs support. This is another one that is a continuation. We saw, there's the 50% statistic in this one, that boat launches saw a 50% increase in use this last year. We know that the lake is constantly being threatened by new invasive species, which can change the whole ecosystem and the economics in some cases of businesses that depend upon recreation on the lake. Fortunately, the lake, notwithstanding its hydraulic connections to the Hudson Canal and the Hudson River and also to the Great Lakes, is cleaner from a standpoint of invasive species. I believe Lori stated in a previous one of these that we have about a fourth of the invasive species as are typical in the Great Lakes, and about half of those in the Hudson River. So while we are hydraulically connected and we have concern for the fact that they're out there and they can come in, we have done a reasonably good job. We need to keep this up, especially looking at boat launch facilities where volunteers are doing wonderful work, but those are in limited areas and they have limited resources. These lake associations have limited resources. An ounce of prevention is worth multiple tons of cure when it comes to preventing invasive species from becoming established in our waterways. And I don't think any more needs to be said about the importance of that. But it's one that we have continued to support.
I have a question
Yes.
for Jeff. This is Jane Kitchell. I have a question. It's just more of informational. I know Lake Maury, which is in my Senate district. There's a very strong Lake Maury Protective Association, and they actually have played a very important role in partnership and on funding some of the, and one of the big challenges, of course, has been milfoil, which was taking over the lake. Is there a comparable organization for Lake Champlain? I realize it's such a large body of water compared to others, but are there organizations? I realize a lot of what we're saying is the state must do this, the state, we need more money. But my question really gets to whether there are partnership organizations that exist maybe for different sections of the lake.
Yes, I'm going to defer to Lori Fisher, as she is the expert on that. But my understanding is there are organizations in several organizations along the lake in separate areas. But go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that question, Senator Kitchell. I direct the Lake Champlain Committee. We're a regional watershed bi-state organization that focuses on water protection and a healthy ecosystem. So we certainly have gotten involved in those same programs on Lake Champlain. Lake Champlain also has a successful and ongoing program for water chestnut harvesting in the South Lake, and that's a public-private partnership with state funds. The Lake Champlain Basin program, which Jeff mentioned before, which coordinates efforts to reduce pollution and implement the Lake Champlain Restoration Plan, has since, I believe, 2007, had a boat steward program running on Lake Champlain where there's educational information going out at all the major boat access sites on Lake Champlain. And there, last year, there were washing stations set up in the North Lake. There's a lot of coordination, particularly on Lake Champlain, on these issues of aquatic invasive species, not only in our region, but also key people sit on national task forces focused on, everything for how do you manage and how do you prevent species and get that information out. And the focus really on Lake Champlain is very much on keeping additional species out. We have 51 right now, and keeping the ones that are here and limited to Lake Champlain from spreading into other inland waterways like Lake Maury.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next item is investment in agricultural transition to sustainability. We have the Chairman Starr and members of the Agriculture Committee are on here, far more expert in this than I am. I believe Mark Nod is on, and actually Eric Clifford is a member of the committee. I don't believe he's on today, but he brings an awful lot of expertise in the state and challenges facing farmers in Vermont to the rest of us who are not nearly as knowledgeable about that. The committee's recommendation in this regard is for the Agency of Agriculture, Farm and Markets to continue to provide dairy farmers with better access to alternative models of agriculture, more profitable for them, and also better from a standpoint of ecosystem protection and water quality protection. And there's a transition underway. It's being driven largely by economic forces beyond the control of anybody in Vermont. And there is potentially an opportunity, as much as this is very much a crisis for agriculture in Vermont, there is nonetheless an opportunity to try to save as much of the economic sector that we have in Vermont by transitioning to other models, more sustainable models, more profitable models. And there has been quite a bit of that going on, but we don't see that the circumstances that we face today are going to change anytime in the immediate future. And that it continues to be, notwithstanding the amazing progress that the agricultural community and the farmers in this state have done to reduce phosphorus loading to the lake. And that should not go unstated and unrecognized. But nonetheless, it's a heavy lift and more progress is going to be needed. And this is one way to support this ongoing transition in agriculture and at the same time benefit the environment, by working these things together. So we want to work with that. I don't know if anybody wants to amplify that. I think Mark just joined.
Yeah, and Jeff, this is Bobby. We have been working in the committee, but also in approach, we approved money for ecosystems enhancement through the agency, put extra money in to expand and update and upgrade our slaughtering facilities. And working to, we're also working on trying to get better pricing for our dairy milk. But the goat farming has been expanding with Vermont Creamery. And that's really just getting going with a new farm coming online with, I guess, about 1,000 additional or more goats. So we're working in that direction, and hemp, we put quite a lot of effort into that, even though it hasn't panned out too well yet. But we're still working to enhance that marketing business. So we're working along, hearing a lot from farmers as well as people that deal with water quality and A&R, and I think we're on the same page. It's just transitioning over. It's hard to teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. The next one is the recommendation of the committee, which may generate some questions. It did the last time I did this, to basically remove or discontinue the memorandum of understanding between the Agency of Agriculture, Farms and Markets and the Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Environmental Conservation regarding the enforcement activity for water runoff for basically point source pollution from agriculture. It is the view of the committee that the relationship between the two agencies has not resulted in the desired coordination, that the effect of it has been insufficient enforcement, bad public relations, which may in fact be overstated and amplified in the media. In other words, it may not actually reflect what's going on, but nonetheless, it's been an issue. And also the farmers themselves find, as we are hearing, that they are getting caught in the middle of agencies that have shared responsibility for this, and too often kind of point at the other guy, and meanwhile illicit discharges take place or no actions taking place. It's our view that the Agency of Agriculture is exceptionally good and well suited at doing what we just spoke about, which is this transition. They're exceptionally good about providing technical assistance and achieving compliance on farms. That's essentially what they do with great success. However, when that doesn't result in compliance, notwithstanding all of those efforts, there needs to be an enforcement follow through. And the current MOU has not functioned to actually get effectively or consistently to that last step. It's our view, and as a former DEC commissioner, I can speak to this, that's DEC's bailiwick. is that enforcement. If they're not doing it or not doing it adequately, they should be held directly responsible for the lack of effective enforcement. And it should not be a situation where the regulated entity is being whipsawed back and forth between two agencies, which we believe has been happening. The chairman, Mark Nod, can speak to the specifics of that as well, if there are any questions on that one.
Yeah, well, we should get to the bottom of that because, you know, we're putting a lot, we as legislators and groups, we're putting a lot of money into trying to clean up our point source pollutions and all of our pollutions. And if we've got a couple of agencies that aren't adhering to their end of the bargain, I mean, we should know about that and call them in. And in a group meeting, you know, both of them at the same time and deal with that, because it's not, certainly not our intentions to allow that to continue.
Okay. If I'll just move to the last section and then I'll open it up for other comments or questions. The last section, the last recommendation is the next generation toxic pollution. There are two basically concerns here. The first is our database, the state's database, or it's the information that it collects on the use of agricultural chemicals and other contaminants that are spread on the land, you know, at homes, golf courses, and at farms and so forth, has been minimal. So we really don't have a good handle on what is coming in and where it's going, and you know, to what degree it's being used. We have some information, but when we try to drill down on this stuff, we run into data quality concerns regarding the base information of what's going on. We are very concerned, and Lori can speak to this one if there's any questions. We're very, very concerned about this next generation of contaminants. I'm going to put my former DEC hat on for a minute. The two statements. Number one, the Federal Clean Water Act is arguably the most successful environmental legislation in the history of the United States. And I think I can defend that statement till the cows come home, so to speak. TSCA, the federal law concerning pesticides and those kinds of contaminants, hazardous chemicals and so forth, has not been as successful. There are a lot of problems. And so all manner of new chemicals are being developed by industry all the time, most of them wonderful, providing great benefits, but not terribly well understood. And they're going out into the marketplace, and they're going out into the market. And we're finding out sometimes years later of the long-term, at the very least, consequences or effects of some of these. These things, and PFAS is kind of the poster child for this argument now, but there's much, much more than that. These things are now becoming ubiquitous, not only in our bloodstreams, but in the environment. And now we're raising concerns for long-term public health concerns or environmental concerns. So we think we need to raise the awareness of this and try as much as Vermont can to get a handle on what's being used and what we know about it, so that if there's a need to regulate or to control or to better research the effect of some of these new contaminants and chemicals that are getting more and more used, that we get ahead of it rather than react to it after it becomes ubiquitous and across the board in our waterways and elsewhere. So that's a nutshell on that last bullet.
Mr. Wimberg, on that last bullet, if we could follow up maybe after the meeting and learn more about the kind of the granularity of the information that you believe would be helpful, that would be good for us. I know that we've been working with DEC, and we share your concern and frustration over PFAS, for instance. So we have very protective levels on 5, but it's a family of 5,000. And what we asked well, yeah, we say ask. We're always polite. We ask the DEC to start formulating rules, if possible, to regulate by class or at least subclass, so that we're not, 4,995 chemicals behind and just trying to catch up. So Vermont is partnered with other states on that, and I think we're actually sort of on the leading edge of figuring it out. But you're right, TSCA, Toxic Substance Control Act, it's one of its first provisions was to grandfather in 59,000 chemicals currently in commerce at that point in time. And it has not been, it's not oriented to being protective. It's oriented to letting chemicals into commerce.
Right, and it forces regulators to be reactive, and we're basically advocating to try to do exactly what, Mr. Chairman, you just described, which is to be more proactive. Lori, can you speak to the some of the specifics that we learned, just to give a sense of the concerns that we have regarding at least the data?
Sure, and thank you, Jeff, and thank you, committee members, for this time. As Jeff noted, as part of our due diligence to develop the action plan every year, we are, am I still here? I just want to see.
Yep.
Okay. My screen just switched. Okay. So as part of our due diligence, we get presentations from area experts, et cetera. And one presentation was from Nat Shambaugh, former chemist at the Agricultural Agency, since retired, but who has been doing work for the Lake Champlain Basin program to further review some of these issues. And one of the issues he brought out was the increase dramatically in the use of both glyphosate and atrazine. They're associated with agriculture, and the glyphosate, which is, I think, commonly known as Roundup, that increased dramatically and was supposed to decrease the amount of atrazine, when in point of fact that didn't happen. And also what came out of that testimony is that there's poor tracking of the just the amount of use and the sales, that we don't have good data and tracking associated with that. So one of the recommendations, nor do we have a really good understanding of, we're not monitoring in our water systems for those. So one of the things our committee made a recommendation that as part of the ongoing long-term monitoring, the state and the Lake Champlain Basin program look at identifying opportunities to gather more information on herbicides and pesticide use as part of either the long-term monitoring program or separate from that. And our chair, Mark Nod, has been advancing that through the various channels with the Lake Champlain Basin program. I think, we don't have a definitive answer on what they're going to do, but I think it next will go before their technical advisory committee. And we're hoping that there will be some gains there. And so that's one of the things we tried to outline in this. We need a better process for really tracking what the chemical use is, what the sales are, and also why these are going up when we have a pesticide advisory council whose mission, and both agencies have a mission of toxics reduction. Why are we seeing these increases?
Ms. Fisher, so sometimes I think we've talked about phosphorus as a proxy for many other things. So it's benign, but when it's when emitted in too high a level, we get algae blooms. It's a little hard for me to imagine, but I haven't seen the science behind it. So I guess that's what we're looking for. If phosphorus is moving, what else is moving with it, I guess is the question. And does that include pesticides or herbicides, things that are atrazine, for instance? I don't know if you have data on that, or it's just, seems like a prudent question to ask and then to begin testing for.
Go ahead.
Laura, I feel to, I think with some of the work and following the resolution that the Vermont Citizens Advisory Committee put forward to the executive and steering committees at the Basin program, stemmed from presentations we heard, not just from Nat, but also from Kerry Guerre at the Agency of Agriculture regarding the monitoring and sampling and the database management that the agency does. One of the things that was presented, and I think went to this assumption that with the increased use of cover cropping for ag practices, that we would see a reduction in the use of defoliants, atrazine and glyphosate or Roundup. And what it's shown is not just in agriculture, but in forestry and also rights of way, there's been a dramatic increase, and not a reduction in either, but a huge increase in Roundup as that Roundup Ready planting and defoliant herbicide application increased throughout the country, not just in Vermont, actually throughout the world. We also saw an increase in use of atrazine, which had been trending down. And so that caused some alarm. And when I presented it to the executive and steering committees and our federal partners there, I believe, like many, the assumption was that with cover crops, which have been a huge part of the reduction of phosphorus loading from the agricultural sector all over the country, and particularly that's the applause in Vermont for the work we've made towards solving some of the challenges with the TMDL. I think the assumption was there would be a concurrent reduction in use in chemicals. And actually what happens is that while UVM Extension and others are working on mechanical solutions, crimping of the cover crops as they grow in order to stop their growth and release whatever is being planted, whether it's typically corn, but whatever the crop that might be planted on those fields, it needs to be released. And defoliants, herbicides have been the tool of choice. And so there's some concern because we're not doing good edge of field or monitoring and sampling in our water bodies for what that chemical cocktail might actually represent, let alone what the health or human impacts of those. We know that atrazine has some challenges. Glyphosate science is still out there on whether there's long-term negative human health impacts. It is recommended not to be sprayed adjacent waterways, and yet it's finding its way in. There is a USGS plan, I think it will be implemented this summer, to do some analysis and also seeking some additional funding to see where the neonicotinoids, which is another class of chemicals that we understand have significant negative impacts on our pollinators particularly, to try to address what's making its way into the water with these change in practices. So I guess to answer your question, while we did see good P-load reduction, the chemical contributions, while we've reduced P-loads, are poorly understood, and the database is not well managed. So that's what we've asked for, both from the state and from our partners at the Basin program.
Well, great. We should think the committee, and I suspect the Ag committee too, would be interested in, we're always trying to get better data in order to make an informed decision. So, well, let's schedule to follow up and learn more after today. Thanks.
And Jeff, if I may, we've heard testimony that the Pesticide Advisory Board really wasn't meeting in proper sequences. The board was too large to really work well together, and we're working on putting together a new, I guess you'd say with more expertise in the areas of chemicals and the new chemicals. We would call that the innovative Agricultural Innovative Board. And it would be made up of a smaller number of people, but with more technical expertise to recommend, different chemicals to the agency that should be used and shouldn't be used. And we took testimony earlier this week and have more scheduled for next week. And probably we'll be working with Chris and his committee, Natural Resources, on formulating that group. But we had the Secretary of Natural Resources in yesterday to give us her point of view, and so we're moving forward. Hopefully we'll do better.
That sounds like it's very consistent with that last number 6 recommendation that the committee's made. So thank you so much, Senator.
Great. So I'm just looking at the clock. We all have the floor in about 20 minutes. And I know that some people came right from another committee meeting. So I'm trying to make sure we break with enough time for people to grab a sandwich between meetings. Is there anything we haven't covered in the meeting so far that you all wanted to make sure we heard about during your visit?
I'd leave it up to the other members of the advisory committee to chime in if they want to add something.
Okay.
Were you able to say all the Lori, did you get everything that you wanted to say? I had a quick something, but I wanted to make sure you had enough time. But you're muted.
Go ahead first, Hillary, and I see Mark is raising his hand, so I'll go after you if there's still
why don't I
time.
go if there's time? Because
Yeah.
I want to let you guys go, and I'll go if there's time.
I just want to wrap up and thank the committees for allowing us to present this. We look forward to any follow-up you might desire from us. We come to you every year with priorities. I think that the committee consensus was that we're at a unique time with our opportunities for our COVID response funding that might be flowing through, and additional funding flowing through the administration and our all-star congressional delegation to look at the allocation of those funds and the policies that might be supported with the lens of the priorities that we've presented. They're long-term investments necessary for a high-quality environment that's so critical to the long-term economy, the health of Vermonters, and beyond. And COVID has spotlighted some of these issues and maybe amplified the urgency of how we might be addressing them. We know we have a whole suite of issues and lots of demands for limited resources, but consensus is that a healthy Lake Champlain watershed is a winning investment every single time. And there's opportunities to jump on that now.
Okay. Before we go to Senator Sears, just a quick to follow up on that remark. Although it's committees of appropriations that will be looking at the budget in the end, committees of jurisdiction often make recommendations over. Do you have any documents that tie together these high-level goals, which I'm pretty confident everyone in this meeting supports, and the particular programs and funding levels that exist now and that you might propose any increases for? If you could connect the two, that would be helpful, I think, for everyone who's here.
We'll do what we can with the materials that we have, and then with developing that consensus from the committee.
Okay, great. Senator Sears.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed part of the meeting. I had another meeting at noontime today. And if this subject was already taken up, that's fine. You can let me know offline. I want to know if the polluters who caused the damage to Lake Champlain are being held accountable before we spend taxpayer money. And some of those funds that Senator Bray was just talking about on the cleanup of Lake Champlain. I get this feeling that the polluters have not been held accountable, that they have scaled away. And I really need to know how we're doing on that.
Thanks, Senator Sears. I think we, as a committee, we've discussed, and I think our most prior years, we specifically addressed a polluter pays principle needs to be reinforced in all of our policies in the state of Vermont. It was either last year's or possibly the year before, as I think we used that language. I can't speak for the entire committee. In my perspective as an environmental attorney and land use attorney, in general, the polluter pays principle has not worked around the country, let alone in the state of Vermont. And we hear from committees and membership that we have to make trade-offs, and that the trade-offs are, we don't have the resources to provide sufficient enforcement, or we have policies that limit enforcement, or as Jeff noted, we don't have the resources to the 3-acre permit rule that Jeff discussed earlier is the next level as we're sort of ratcheting down on polluter pays. We just don't have the resources to support them even figuring out what are the best engineered solutions to catch up with our updated regulations and our better understanding of what their impacts are.
So let me give you a little genesis of my question. Right? I live in North Bennington, Vermont. I live on contaminated property now by St. Gobain Plastics Company.
Right.
We're trying to do our best to hold them accountable. They've already ponied up quite a bit of money, but I see us with this huge bill to clean up Lake Champlain, and those that polluted it getting away scot-free, and it doesn't seem right to me. And I'm going to have a hard time throwing money until I see some results from the effort. I realize it's not easy. I realize that it's difficult, and that the business interests are always fighting to make the taxpayer or the individual who was contaminated pay for the pollution. But it's got to stop somewhere, and I say it's time to stop it. And I just feel so upset to hear that we're going to plow millions more of the federal relief funds into Lake Champlain when we're not getting money from the polluter. This doesn't solve my problem. That's just my final comment. I appreciate, you all taking the time, and as Senator Bray said, we have to get to the floor, but I'm going to be eyeing that as part of the cleanup effort.
Senator Bray, thanks, Senator Sears. If you might give me 30 seconds just to give a sort of broad
Sure, let's
just
do one last question or comment, and then I think we do need to politely excuse ourselves and head to the floor.
So what we've learned as we studied Lake Champlain, like the Great Lakes or any other of our significant water bodies, is there's significant legacy pollutants there. They are from policies or practices that happened before regulations existed. We didn't have wastewater control systems that Jeff or Bob Fisher ran until the 60s. We didn't have good water supply treatment facilities until around that time too, in the 70s. Clean Water Act didn't happen until 72. During post-war, rail cars of phosphorus were shipped to Vermont at ridiculously cheap prices, with all agriculture agencies saying, use this, it's for the better good. And so we have literally millions of tons of pre-existing load that we have to deal with. So present polluters, I think we're ratcheting down on. Past pollution, it's all of us, and we bear the brunt of it. And the challenge is it's more expensive today, and we'll get even more expensive tomorrow. And it's public trust resources, and it's our kids that are going to bear the brunt of it again. So I think that's the context for, I share your frustration, but Lake Champlain has this legacy that is multi-generational, and the present polluters are us also.
Well, that's a little bit of a down note to end on, but on the other hand, it is a sobering task. We know it. And part of the earlier conversation about getting data, I mean, I think we all feel the responsibility, fiduciary responsibility, to spend taxpayer dollars well. And that means knowing what we're getting for the money we're investing. unless there's anyone else who wants to make a closing remark, I would just say thank you everyone on the committee for your year-round and years-round work on this and helping us better understand in the State House what's going on out in the waters of the state. It's very helpful. Look forward to following up with you on some of the more detailed questions that came up today.
Thank you. and
Thank you very, very
Thank
much for the
you.
opportunity.
Thank you all.